Okay, let's get to audience questions. First one, hey David, could you lay out a basic financial plan for someone who works and is middle class but just has no idea what to do? I understand lots of people aren't in a position to save any money, but it would be great to hear you talk about what middle class people should be doing. Yeah, I've hesitated to do this, number one, because I don't want to be condescending to anybody based on their financial situation, and also because I don't want to be giving financial advice. So let me say, none of this is all hypothetical. It's not advice for anyone's specific situation, but some basic principles are: if you don't have $1,000 in an emergency fund, you need $1,000 in an emergency fund, and not having it, I would consider an emergency. You need to significantly curtail all spending until you have that $1,000. We did a story not long ago about how some very high percentage of Americans would not be able to afford an unexpected $400 expense without like putting it on a credit card or borrowing from friends. That's a real problem. So you need the $1,000 because of the healthcare system we have. You probably, in addition to the thousand, should also have whatever your deductible is. If your deductible yearly is $2,000 on health insurance, you probably want that in addition to the $1,000 emergency fund. That's just a reality. And then you want to be working towards a 3 to 6 month, not now it's no longer an emergency fund, but sort of an income replacement fund. The ideal scenario would be to have 6 months of, if your income went to zero, you could pay for everything you're currently paying for 6 months. That would be a great place to be. And whether that's practical for different people really depends on their situation. You want to avoid high interest credit card debt. You ideally would just be paying. I use my credit card like a debit card. I use it for frequent flyer miles and I pay it off every month. Not everybody can do that. I understand that, but you want to be avoiding any fees and interest that are not necessary because it just takes away. It's money you're just giving away to financial institutions. And then you do want to think a little bit about your sort of general asset allocation. And this includes thinking about retirement plans. How much cash should you have versus money in tax deferred investment accounts versus in real estate, for example. So again, everybody's situation is very different. Just having cash, having a whole bunch of cash and then not really contributing to anything that is going to grow in terms of a retirement account or an investment account is not particularly wise. I'm being deliberately vague, again, because I am not giving specific financial advice. But as an example, I used to invest in mutual funds in real estate investment trusts, REITs as they're called. And it's like a proxy for investing in real estate. When I actually started getting involved in real estate directly with properties that I'm involved with, I realized it's too much real estate. I should stop investing in the REITs and maybe look at reallocating that to something else. My philosophy on investing is don't pick stocks. Look for the lowest cost, broadest mutual funds and figure out what is your balance between stocks and bonds. There are lots of tools out there. One says you take the number 120 and you take the number 100 and subtract your age, and that's the percent you want to be in stocks. So if you're 30 years old, you want to be 70% in stocks, which actually seems a little bit conservative maybe for my taste, but there's all these tools that will help you figure that out. When it comes to things like mortgages, very often it is not logical to take a huge chunk of money and pay off the mortgage if you actually figure out the numbers financially, because there is a tax benefit to paying mortgage interest. And if your mortgage is 4% and you can invest in something that historically returns 7%, you're better off taking the money and putting it into the investment instead of into the mortgage. But everybody's situation is different. There's a sort of psychological value to paying down or paying off a mortgage, which what might make it the right thing for some people, even if they are effectively accepting a lower return as a result. So it's really hard to have a sort of overarching financial plan, but my sort of tips in general are: you need $1,000 right away, plus your health insurance exposure, the amount you're exposed to health insurance spending in an emergency fund, working towards 6 months of expenses in case you earned nothing for 6 months. You want to ensure that you are not on the hedonic treadmill and that your expenses are properly attuned to your income, and you don't want to start spending more every time you make a little more. Don't get into the cycle of living beyond your means in terms of using high interest credit card debt for anything other than absolute necessities. Again, if you use it like a debit card to accrue points and you pay it off in full, that's okay. And then you want to be contributing as much as you can in the most advantaged way possible towards retirement. So if your employer offers a 50% match up to 6% of your income, you, if you can afford it, want to be contributing 6% of your income to that retirement plan to get the 3% from your employer, because that's, quote, free money. Of course, nothing is really free. You can make the case that your salary is lower because your employer is already accounting for that in the offer to match your contributions 50 cents on the dollar up to 6%. But still, it's money that's available, and you want to be taking advantage of that. And really, a lot of this stuff comes back to the tax impact. So it is important to read up on or have an accountant that can advise you, for example, about, with the recent Trump tax reform, now that there has been a limit placed on the deductibility of certain types of taxes, is it as advantageous to have that mortgage? Or would it be better to look at paying it down and investing the money elsewhere, et cetera? This is all very vague stuff, but I hope I'm at least telling you sort of like a basic framework that I apply. And again, when it comes to any kind of investment, one of your top priorities should be reduce the cost. Vanguard and Betterment, without giving any particular endorsements, have fees that are so low, sometimes 0.03, 0.05%, compared to what sometimes are 1 or 2% management fees for similar asset allocation in other institutions. So pay very, very close attention to that. Okay, that does it for that question. Let's move on, and I'm glad to take more questions about this. Someone actually had the idea, David, you should do on your Twitch stream whenever you launch it, you should just do like personal finance stuff, since your background is in personal finance from grad school. It's an interesting idea. I think I'm just kind of out of the game, and I wouldn't really be the right person to be giving that kind of advice, which could be funny in a sense, but I also don't want to damage anybody's financial circumstances.